welcome to my AuthorTube channel. My name is Bobbi Holmes. I am the USA Today Bestselling Author of the paranormal cozy mystery series, Haunting Danielle. I also write under the pen name Anna J. McIntyre. I didn't post a regular AuthorTube video last week because I was in the process of uploading a audiobook video I created of one of my books, Havasu Palms, A Hostile Takeover. It's a nonfiction book, and I wanted to make an audiobook out of it, but it really needed the photographs that are included in the book to go with it. And so I decided to do something a little different. I narrated the entire book, and I made a YouTube video out of it. And you can watch it for free. You can find it in my videos, Havasu Palms, A Hostile Takeover. Well, today I'm going to be discussing author income, or more accurately, why don't I have any author income? I mentioned in my second video that it is possible to make a living at self-publishing for an author. There's no guarantees, but it is something that can be done. So for those people that aren't able to make it, and there's people out there, I'm sure they're watching this right now going, well, I haven't really made any money at this. Why? Do I suck as a writer? Well, sometimes that can be the reason that people suck at their writing. You know, they're not very good at it, and so they're not going to make any money at it. But that's not the only reason. I know a number of authors that are very talented and they're just not making any money at their self-publishing. And it's not because they're lousy writers. There are other reasons. And so I wrote a list of 10 reasons why you may not be making any money at self-publishing. So let's go over this and see if you're doing any of these, and maybe you can fix them and improve your income. The first one on the list is that you published your practice novel. So what is a practice novel? Well, I'll explain this way. My very first book of fiction that I ever published was Colson's Lessons. It was originally released as Lessons. And when I put that book out, I had written 3 other books of fiction, which I'll never ever have published, and I consider those my practice books. Back when the trade publication was pretty much the only way to get out there for authors before the self-publishing revolution a few years back, the gatekeepers, as they called them, they sort of handled the situation of those practice novels. You know, people would write a book, they'd send it off and try to query and try to get an agent or a publisher, and they'd get rejected over and over. And a persistent author, they might finally realize that book wasn't any good, and then they would write something else until they finally made it. Well, now, one of the complaints with self-publishing is that everybody can publish. Well, that's true, everybody can publish. But that also means a lot of those practice novels get in and get thrown out there, and so that's the quality issue, that they're not quite ready for prime time. Now, that does not mean that you're a bad writer whatsoever. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that that book wasn't quite ready, or you still need to work on your craft before you put one out there. So, should you never self-publish the very first book that you ever write? No. There's always an exception to every norm, and a good example of that is New York Times bestselling author Colleen Hoover. The very first book Colleen ever wrote was slammed, and as the story goes, her son was in a play and she needed to go to his rehearsals and wait for him, and so while she was there, she borrowed a family member's laptop and she ended up writing her very first book. She self-published that book. It hit the New York Times bestseller list. Months later, it was snapped up by a major trade publisher, and since then she has released one New York Times bestseller after another. Now, Colleen is both in the trade and the self-publishing world. She never left her roots of self-publishing, but she's done phenomenally well. We're all very proud of her, and she is an example of somebody whose very first book made it. But unfortunately, that's not true for all of us. And so that is one issue that you might be having. So it doesn't mean that you're a bad writer. It just means those particular books or book really weren't ready for prime time yet. And maybe you need to step back and have another look at it and see if you just need to keep writing or what you need to do. So that is the very first one on my list. The second one on the list is your book may be a little too unique. And what I mean by that is, when a book is really unique and it doesn't fit into a specific genre, it makes it very difficult to market. And it doesn't mean that your book's not any good, but what it does mean is if you were a famous author, you would have a better chance of getting that book out there because people would be looking at you, not necessarily looking at genres. And there are a lot of authors out there that their fans will read whatever they write. But when you're just starting out, if you put a book out there in the world and it doesn't really fit with another genre. It makes it very difficult for you to market. And that can be a real problem for book sales. So as you're doing the self-publishing as an author, you have to always keep in mind that you do wear two hats. One is the artistic hat, and that artistic side of you wants to write that book. And then there's that business side of you that wants to sell books to make a living. And they think, oh, well, is this product really going to sell to the consumers, because it's going to be hard to market? And so you have to work that out and just realize that there are going to be extra hurdles that you're going to have to, get past when you have a book that's a little too unique. And I'm not saying don't write them, I'm just saying being aware that that can be an issue for marketing. Number 3 on my list, and I think this is a very important one, and that is you simply don't have enough books published right now to really make an income, at least an income where it's a livable income anyway. And that is a big one. You have to, when you write full-time, you have to write full-time. You have to put books out there. Very rarely will somebody make a living doing this with just 1 or 2 books out. It happens, but it is an exception to the rule. So how many books does it really take? Well, there's a writing group out there. They're very, very well known. You probably have already heard of them. It's called 20 to 50K. They have a very active Facebook group. They put on conventions. I went to one of their I think it was their very first convention in Las Vegas. I think it was about 3 years ago. They had some really good speakers. But their philosophy is that it takes 20 books. Once you have 20 books, then you can make $50,000 a year. Now, of course, that doesn't mean, like you can just throw up crap out there. It has to be, 20 decent books to make $50,000 a year. And they have a whole philosophy on that, and you can go check them out. And so, is that really accurate? Well, I started thinking about it when I was putting together for the show today, and I thought, I looked back at myself. And now the first year when I started self-publishing, as I mentioned in the second video, I made decent money, but that had a lot to do with the time. It was back then when this whole thing was pretty new. It was in the gold rush era, and so it was easier to make money back then. And a lot of the authors that have been around since then will say it was easier back then than it is now. In fact, my second year, I took a significant dip in income, big time, but it started going up the next year because I started implementing to improve my income. Actually, the year that I reached 50,000, and I actually went over 50,000, was the year I had 20 books up. So the year I had 20 books up, I reached the 50 and went over it. So the 20 to 50K, I think they have something there. So that is something to consider. Now, 20 books might seem like, oh my God, I can never write 20 books. Well, that's just sort of how it is. You do have to have books out there to generate income. But like I said, there are some people that are able to make an income on this, and they don't have quite as many books, but there's all kinds of different marketing tactics. But that's just one reason why you may not be making the money that you want to make right now, is you may not have enough books up there. Number 4 has to do with genre. Now you might be saying, hey, I have 20 books up and I'm not making $50,000 a year, and I know they're pretty good books. Well, my question is, what genre do you write in, or do you write in multiple genres? And the problem is this: authors that genre hop, they write in a couple different genres. They have a little science fiction here, a little romance here, a little fantasy here. They're all over the place. And the side, remember what I said about the 2 sides? You have the artistic side and you have the business side. Well, I understand the artistic side wants to write all that stuff, and that's great. But the business side is going to hurt. And the reason why is because it's very difficult to market to all those different people at the same time. They're different readers. A science fiction reader may not read romance or whatever other ones that you're writing. So that can be a real problem. When you focus on one genre, what you do is when you get those readers, then they go on to read your other books. But if the other books you have out there are totally different genre, then that's not going to help you at all. So that's one thing I see with a lot of different authors. They have some great books out there, but they keep feeding their creative side, which is great, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but they have to ask themselves, do they also want to be financially successful at that? So that's the thing they have to decide, and either that or come up with a marketing strategy to market all those different books. So that's kind of a decision you have to come up with, but that's a reality that you have to be aware of when you're writing. Number 5 on my list. You know those 20 books you have out there? Are they standalone books or are they part of a series? One of the very first lessons that I learned when I got into self-publishing was it's very difficult to make a living selling standalone books. The way to go is a book series. And the reason for that is it makes marketing that much easier. You're marketing your series, which is multiple books, multiple sales, as opposed to one book. And even if you find a reader that enjoys your standalone book, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to buy the rest of your books in your catalog. But if you get a reader that likes the first book in your series, it's more of a chance that he or she will go ahead and buy and read the rest of the books in that series. Now, if you're an author that is pursuing a trade deal, then you have to think of it a little differently, because from what I understand, agents are not that receptive to trying to pitch a book series from a new author. It's just not something that's really wanted in the industry. I mean, for one reason, if the publisher goes ahead and publishes your book and it doesn't do that well, chances are they're not going to want to spend money on the rest of the books in the series. So they're looking more for standalone books from a first-time author. But when you are self-publishing, it's a whole different ballgame. The next one on the list is going to be no surprise to anyone. What is one of the first things a lot of people say, my book just isn't doing very well? People always bring up the book cover. I mean, that is a pretty common one. What's the book cover look like? Is it professional? Is it homemade? Well, before I go on, I want to say to those of you out there who can hear you already thinking, oh, I don't really pay that much attention to the book cover. I read books all the time with covers that are, not that great, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's you, but that's not most readers out there. A book, and it's not necessarily that they care about what the cover looks like. It what attracts them to pick up the book in the first place. So unless there's not some other reason for them to pick up that book or to look at it, that cover is an ad. It's what's drawing them in, and you can't ignore that. So stop making excuses about how you don't really care about covers about the books that you read, because that doesn't really apply. That just doesn't work. Sorry, guys. So that being said, it's not just important to have a professional looking cover. I mean, that's what we always hear, have a professional cover designer. But what's also equally, probably more important, is to have a cover that is applicable to the genre that you are writing. And the reason for that is when readers are looking for books and they have in their mind a certain kind of read that they want. Maybe they're going through a certain kind of book and they want to read another one sort of like it. And they look for similar covers. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be the same exact cover, but it has to strike the same chord as the books they're familiar with in that genre. So you want to really make sure that the cover that you have for your book fits that genre. And I will give an example of that. About 30 years ago, or more or less, I went through a reading phase where I was reading a lot of historical romances. And back then, one of the very popular cover models was Fabio. He was always on the covers of most of these books, or somebody that looked like Fabio anyway. And one of the things that really bugged me back then from a reader's perspective is I wanted the guy on the cover to look like the guy in the book, how the author described him. And the guy on the cover never looked like the guy in the book, and that bugged me as a reader. But did that prevent me from picking up and buying that book? No. Because the purpose of the cover was to say, hey, I'm over here. If I'm the kind of read you're looking for, pick me up. That's who I am over here. That's what Fabio on the cover did. It was a flag for the readers to know to pick up the book because that was the read they were looking for. It had nothing to do really for anything else. It was just a sign that this is what you're looking for. And so one of the big mistakes the authors make, they want a real pretty cover. They want a really unique cover. Well, that's good and dandy. But if you're a new author, what you really want more than any of that, you want readers looking for the type of book that you have written. And so you need to look at other covers in your genre, the ones that are doing well. And I'm not saying copy them, but do something similar. Do something so that when your book is out there on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or whatever, and they're flipping through the covers, that cover reaches out and says, hey, I'm over here. I'm the one you're looking for. And that is the purpose of a book cover. So number 7 kind of goes along with the entire cover thing, and that is branding. It's so important to not just have great covers, but have consistent branding in your covers. And sometimes consistent branding can actually make a cover that's not that great of a cover look better if they're all very branded. And that means, like consistent fonts throughout. Like if you have a series, particularly for a series, you're going to want consistent, titles throughout. You're going to want, the author names, normally in the same place on each book. There has to be something where it all kind of ties them together. So branding is very, very, very important if you want your series to look professional, if you want to draw readers in and to have them look at all the books in the series. Plus, it helps the reader understand that those books all do go together. If you have a series well branded, you know that they all go together, as opposed to if they all kind of look really different, then maybe somebody really liked your first book in the series, but if all the other books don't really kind of go together, they may not even realize or look that they are all the same series, and so you're going to miss sales that way. Now, what I did, and it worked out very well for me with my Haunting Danielle series. Now, one of the things I noticed when I did book covers was that haunted house, cozy type of stories often have houses of some sort on the cover. And that was one of the things that I noticed when I was researching covers for my Haunting Danielle, was that houses were kind of a common theme. And my story has to do with a haunted house. And so I decided, in order to brand it, I put the same house on each book, but I would change what was the silhouettes in the window. So each book looks a little different. The cover, it's the same house, but in the windows are different, or there might be decoration on the house for the holidays or different colors, and the sky might look different. So there's different surroundings, but the house is the same house throughout each cover. So that was what I did with my branding. And then of course the title is always consistent and the author name is always consistent. So branding is very important. So when you start out your series, to think about that, which is one reason you have to be careful. I have no problem with like the pre-designed covers, but if you're planning to write a long-going series, you're going to need to find out, okay, how is that going to work for multiple covers for a series? And so you have to kind of think ahead and plan how you're going to do that, because if you just buy like a pre-made cover, which is fine and dandy to do, but you need to work out what you're going to do for the consistency and the branding of that particular series. And like any business, you have to think ahead. You can't just, oh, this is good, I'll just do it now, and treat it like a business. Now we're at number 8. Okay, your book has been published. Let's say it's at Amazon, and you have a potential reader surfing through your genre, looking for his next book to read. They see your cover, this is what I want. The cover's saying, come to me, I'm what you're looking for. The cover just looks like exactly what they're looking for, because it is similar to the covers of the genre they have read, that they enjoyed, and they want to read more. So they look a little closer and they look at the blurb. So number 8 is the blurb. And the blurb is what's going to tell them a little bit of what the book's about. It's going to try to entice them, draw them in, make them want to look closer to buy your book. It's really essential to do. And there are people that will help you write better blurbs. So if you're not good at it, get help with it. If you're a member of writing groups, there's a lot of writing groups. I know a writing group I belong to, everybody helps me. I get feedback. Usually the blurbs I'll put out there, and I'll have different writer friends that will give me suggestions, and I usually take their suggestions because they're much better at blurbs than I am. So get that good cover and then follow it up with a good blurb. Number 9, another reason why your book sales may not be terrific. Okay, let's say that your book cover is great. It catches their attention. It says, come here, read me. I'm what you're looking for. And then they move on to your blurb, and your blurb is enticing, it's very professional, it pulls them in, makes them want to read more. But very often they don't immediately click that buy button. They will pull up the free preview and read the first few chapters for free. Now, I always encourage all authors to make sure you have your books professionally edited before you put them out there. But it's also important to give a little special attention to the very first part of that book, the first few chapters that the readers can see for free, and to double check and make sure there's no mistakes or punctuation problems or whatever in that first few chapters, because if they start reading it and they start seeing mistakes right away, chances are they're not going to buy your book. So that is where they're going to really read to see what kind of a writer are you? Are you a very good writer? Do you know how to write? And you have to really prove yourself in those first 2 chapters. And so that is something that you really need to pay attention to. You need to look at your entire book, of course, but those first few chapters are the what's going to sell your book or not. And now we're at number 10. And before I explain what the last item on my list is, I would like to say that while these 10 issues that I mentioned today are all very common reasons why your self-publishing career may not be going as well as you would like, there are other reasons out there that I didn't mention today that could be adversely affecting you. So I just want you to be aware this isn't the complete list. But very often, if you make changes where you see necessary after looking at those, it's very possible that your business will start doing better. So what's number 10 on my list? Well, this one is you haven't found your readers yet. So what does that mean exactly? Well, first off, you have to realize that no matter how great your book is, there will be readers that think you suck, that hate your book. And if you don't believe me, simply go on to Goodreads or go on to Amazon and look up your favorite author, and you're going to find 1-star reviews along with the 5-star reviews, because every reader sees books differently. And so when you look at your books, you have to understand that you are writing not for those people that are leaving 1-star reviews on your books, but for those people who are leaving 5-star reviews. And if you feel confident that there is a group of people that sincerely love your books, and I'm not talking about your Aunt Sally or your best friend or whatever, I'm talking about from strangers, readers that are reading your book, they're strangers. And if there is a group of readers out there that genuinely leave you 5-star reviews without you having to pay them to do it, well, then that is your base. And those are the people you need to seek out. And so that is the trick. And one reason why authors don't make it is they haven't found their readers. And that is a very important thing to do. And it's easier to say than to actually do, but it takes advertising, strategically advertising, marketing. There are tons of videos out there that help you do that. For me, my Haunting Danielle series, I have a base of readers. And so one of the things that I did to keep that growth is you start newsletters, you have Facebook pages, you have social media platforms that draw your readers to those platforms, because when a reader reads a book these days, well, often they don't leave a review, but sometimes they like to go to the social media platform of the favorite authors that they read, or if they just read a book, or they'll go to their Instagram, or they'll go somewhere like that and they want to tell you, yeah, I like your book. And those are the ones you want to encourage and you want to keep track of, and so you want to, start a newsletter to, keep them involved, and you build that base and you keep in touch with your readers. And that is really a key in building a business, is to find your readers and then to keep them and to grow them. And obviously it's a little bit easier said than done, but it can be done. So that's number 10 in my list, which is number 10 is probably the most difficult and the most challenging, but it's also probably the most important. So for now, I'm going to sign off. My voice is getting squeaky again. It does that a lot. And I hope everyone is doing well. I know some states are opening up. I'm still sheltering in place right now, and states are talking about opening, and whatever you do, please stay safe out there and take care. Until next time, and meanwhile, write on.